Captain Sarah Mitchell felt the familiar vibration of her A-10 Thunderbolt II as she flew over the desert training grounds of Nellis Air Force Base. The twin engines hummed beneath her, a sound that had become as comforting as her own heartbeat over the past 8 years of flying the legendary aircraft. Today was supposed to be a routine training mission, but nothing about this day would turn out to be routine. The morning had started like any other. Sarah had arrived at the flight line at 0500 hours, completing her pre-flight inspection with the same meticulous care she had learned from her father, Colonel James Mitchell, who had flown the same aircraft during the Gulf War. Her crew chief, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, had given her a thumbs up as she climbed into the cockpit. Everything was perfect, or so it seemed. "Hawkeye 1, this is Tower. You are cleared for takeoff," came the voice through her headset. "Tower, Hawkeye 1. Cleared for takeoff, understood," Sarah responded, her voice steady and professional. She had made the same radio call hundreds of times, but today something felt different. There was an edge to the air traffic controller's voice that she couldn't quite place. As her A-10 lifted off the runway, Sarah noticed 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons taking off behind her. This wasn't unusual during training exercises, but these particular jets weren't part of her scheduled mission. She made a mental note to ask about them during the debrief. The A-10 Warthog, as it was affectionately known, wasn't the fastest or the prettiest aircraft in the Air Force inventory, but it was built like a tank and could take more punishment than any other fighter jet. Sarah loved everything about her aircraft, from its distinctive twin engines mounted high on the fuselage to the massive 30mm cannon that ran along the nose. More importantly, she loved what the A-10 represented, the ability to protect ground troops when they needed it most. Flying over the Nevada desert, Sarah couldn't help but think about her father. Colonel Mitchell had been a legend in the A-10 community, known for his precision in close air support missions and his unwavering dedication to bringing every pilot home safely. He had been her inspiration to join the Air Force, and his shadow was both a blessing and a burden she carried every day. The training area appeared ahead, marked by the familiar coordinates she had memorized years ago. Sarah began her descent, preparing for the simulated ground attack runs that would make up the bulk of her mission. The desert floor below was dotted with target arrays designed to simulate enemy positions, and she felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with combat training. "Hawkeye 1, this is range control. You are cleared hot on target set Alpha," the range controller's voice crackled through her radio. "Range control, Hawkeye 1. Cleared hot on target set Alpha, copy," Sarah acknowledged as she rolled into her attack run. The A-10's cannon came alive with a distinctive brrrr sound as she fired at the practice targets. The aircraft shuddered slightly from the recoil of the powerful weapon, but Sarah maintained perfect control. Years of training and natural skill combined to make each pass precise and deadly accurate. As she pulled up from her attack run, Sarah noticed the 2 F-16s had moved closer to her position. This was still within normal parameters for a training exercise, but something about their flight pattern seemed off. They were flying in a loose formation behind her, matching her speed but maintaining radio silence. "Unknown F-16s, this is Hawkeye 1. Please identify yourselves and state your mission," Sarah called over the radio. Silence. She tried again, using a different frequency. "Any F-16 aircraft in the training area, this is A-10 Hawkeye 1. Please respond." Still nothing. This was definitely not normal protocol. During training exercises, all aircraft maintained constant communication for safety and coordination purposes. The fact that these two jets were ignoring her radio calls raised immediate red flags. Sarah decided to continue her mission while keeping a close eye on the F-16s. She had 3 more target sets to engage, and she wasn't about to let mysterious escort aircraft interfere with her training objectives. However, as she set up for her next attack run, the F-16s moved into what appeared to be an intercept formation. "What the hell?" Sarah muttered to herself as she watched the 2 fighters take positions on either side of her aircraft. They were close enough now that she could see the pilots in their cockpits, their faces hidden behind oxygen masks and helmet visors. The lead F-16 pilot began making hand signals, pointing downward repeatedly. The universal aviation signal for "follow me" or "land immediately." Sarah's blood ran cold as the implications hit her. These weren't friendly escort aircraft, they were forcing her to land. Her mind raced through the possibilities. Had there been a security breach? Was this some kind of hijacking scenario? The F-16s weren't showing any hostile intent beyond forcing her to change course, but the situation was rapidly escalating beyond anything she had trained for. Sarah keyed her radio to the emergency frequency. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is A-10 Hawkeye 1. I am being intercepted by unknown F-16 aircraft and forced to land. Request immediate assistance. The response came immediately, but not from the voice she expected. Hawkeye 1, this is Falcon Leader. You will comply with our instructions and follow us to the designated landing area. Do not deviate from our flight path. The voice was American, which was somewhat reassuring, but the tone was cold and official. Sarah had never heard of any training exercise that involved forced landings by unidentified aircraft, and her situation awareness was screaming that something was seriously wrong. Falcon Leader, this is Hawkeye 1. I need to see some identification and authorization for this intercept. You are interfering with an authorized training mission, Sarah responded, trying to maintain her composure despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Hawkeye 1, you will comply immediately. This is not a request, came the reply. The lead F-16 moved closer to her aircraft, close enough that she could see the pilot clearly. He was pointing downward again, more emphatically this time. The message was clear: land now or face the consequences. Sarah found herself in an impossible position. Her training told her to never comply with unauthorized demands, but she was also outnumbered and outgunned by two F-16s that could easily shoot her down if they chose to do so. The A-10 was tough, but it wasn't designed for air-to-air combat against modern fighters. Looking down at her instrument panel, Sarah noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. Her aircraft's transponder was showing a code she had never seen before, a special identifier that appeared to be broadcasting automatically. Someone or something had activated a system she didn't even know existed. The mystery deepened as she realized that her aircraft's navigation system was also showing waypoints she hadn't programmed. Someone had remotely accessed her A-10 systems and was guiding her toward an unknown destination. The technology required for such an operation was far beyond anything she had learned about in her years of flying. As they flew toward the designated landing area, Sarah tried to piece together what was happening. The F-16 pilots were obviously American military, based on their radio procedures and aircraft markings, but they were operating under some kind of classified authority she wasn't aware of. The fact that they could remotely access her aircraft's systems suggested a level of technological capability that was both impressive and terrifying. The landing area came into view, a remote airstrip she had never seen before, despite years of flying over the Nevada desert. The runway was clearly military, with sophisticated approach lighting and what appeared to be hardened aircraft shelters in the distance. This wasn't just a training facility, it was a full operational base that somehow existed without her knowledge. Sarah's mind flashed back to all the stories she had heard about classified operations and black sites. Was she about to become part of something she couldn't even imagine? The tail number on her aircraft suddenly felt heavier than usual, as if it carried secrets she was only beginning to understand. As she lined up for final approach, guided by the F-16s that maintained their escort positions, Sarah made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. She would land as instructed, but she would also remember every detail of what happened next. Whatever was about to unfold, she would be ready for it. The A-10's landing gear extended with its familiar mechanical whine, and Sarah felt the aircraft slow as she configured it for landing. The mysterious base grew larger in her windscreen, and she could see personnel moving around the flight line, preparing for her arrival. Hawkeye 1, contact ground control on frequency 121.7 for taxi instructions, the lead F-16 pilot transmitted. Falcon Leader, Hawkeye 1 switching to ground control, Sarah acknowledged, her voice betraying none of the uncertainty she felt inside. As her A-10 touched down on the unfamiliar runway, Sarah knew that her life was about to change forever. The secrets hidden in her aircraft's tail number were about to be revealed, and nothing would ever be the same again. The aircraft rolled to a stop at the designated parking area, and Sarah began her engine shutdown procedures with hands that trembled slightly despite her best efforts to remain calm. Through her canopy, she could see armed security personnel approaching her aircraft, along with what appeared to be high-ranking officers whose uniforms bore insignia she didn't recognize. Whatever was about to happen, Captain Sarah Mitchell was ready to face it with the same courage and professionalism that had made her one of the best A-10 pilots in the Air Force. But, as she watched the mysterious figures approach her aircraft, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to learn something that would change everything she thought she knew about her mission, her aircraft, and herself. The canopy of Sarah's A-10 hissed as the hydraulic system released the locks, and she found herself looking down at a scene that belonged in a movie rather than real life. Armed guards in desert camouflage uniforms stood at precise intervals around her aircraft, their weapons held at the ready but not directly threatening. Behind them, a small group of officers approached with purposeful strides. The man leading the group wore the eagles of a full colonel, but his uniform was different from any Sarah had seen before. It was Air Force blue, but the patches and insignia were either blank or bore symbols she didn't recognize. His face was weathered and serious, with the kind of intensity that came from years of dealing with situations that never made it into official reports. "Captain Mitchell," the colonel called out as Sarah climbed down from her aircraft. His voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I'm Colonel Davidson. Please step away from your aircraft and come with us." Sarah's training kicked in automatically. She maintained military bearing despite the surreal circumstances, snapping to attention and saluting properly. "Sir, Captain Sarah Mitchell reporting as ordered. I request to know the nature of this intercept and the authority under which you're operating." Colonel Davidson returned her salute, but his expression remained unreadable. "All of your questions will be answered, Captain. But first, we need to discuss your aircraft's tail number and what it means." The way he said it sent a chill down Sarah's spine. Her A-10's tail number was 810964, the same number it had carried since she was assigned to the aircraft 3 years ago. She had memorized every detail about her plane, from its maintenance history to its combat record, but now she was beginning to suspect there were details she had never been told. "Sir, my tail number is 810964. It's a standard Air Force identification number for this aircraft," Sarah replied, though she was starting to doubt her own words. Colonel Davidson nodded slowly. "That's what your records show, Captain. But that particular tail number carries a significance that goes far beyond standard Air Force operations. Your aircraft isn't just any A-10 Thunderbolt II. It's the same aircraft your father flew during Operation Desert Storm." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Her father had never mentioned flying the specific aircraft she now piloted. In all their conversations about military service and aviation, he had spoken about the A-10 in general terms but never claimed any personal connection to her particular plane. "Sir, that's impossible," Sarah said, her voice wavering slightly. "My father flew many different aircraft during his career. The odds of me being assigned to the same plane would be astronomical." "Not when that assignment was arranged deliberately," Colonel Davidson replied. "Your father didn't just fly this aircraft, Captain. He was part of a classified mission in 1991 that changed the entire trajectory of modern warfare. And now, 28 years later, that mission has come full circle." Sarah felt the ground shifting beneath her feet, though she remained standing perfectly still. Everything she thought she knew about her father's military service was apparently just the surface of a much deeper story. The fact that she had been assigned to his former aircraft was starting to look less like coincidence and more like destiny. "What kind of classified mission?" Sarah asked, though part of her wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Colonel Davidson gestured toward a nearby building, a low concrete structure that looked like it had been built to withstand anything short of a nuclear attack. "That's a conversation for a more secure location, Captain. What I can tell you here is that your father volunteered for something that saved countless American lives, and the technology developed during that mission is still classified at the highest levels." As they walked toward the building, Sarah noticed details about the base that reinforced its mysterious nature. The hangars were built into the mountainside, nearly invisible from the air. The personnel she saw moved with the quiet efficiency of people who were used to working on projects that didn't officially exist. Even the aircraft parked on the flight line seemed to be modified versions of standard military planes, with additional equipment and unusual antenna arrays. Inside the building, Sarah found herself in a conference room that looked like something from a Pentagon briefing. The walls were lined with monitors and communication equipment, while a large table dominated the center of the room. Several other officers were already seated, all wearing the same modified uniforms with blank or unfamiliar patches. "Captain Mitchell, please have a seat," Colonel Davidson said, indicating a chair at the head of the table. "What I'm about to tell you is classified under the sensitive compartmented information protocols. You are being read into a program that has been operational for nearly 3 decades. Sarah sat down, her mind racing with possibilities. SCI clearance was something she had heard about but never experienced personally. The fact that she was being briefed without prior authorization suggested that her involvement in whatever this was had been planned for a long time. In 1991, your father was part of a program called Project Looking Glass, Colonel Davidson began. The objective was to develop and test advanced avionics systems that could give American pilots unprecedented advantages in combat situations. The technology involved was so revolutionary that it was decided to keep the entire program compartmentalized. A woman wearing the rank of major spoke up from across the table. "Major Thompson, Captain. I was your father's project officer during Looking Glass. He was one of only 12 pilots selected for the program, and the only one who successfully completed all phases of testing." Sarah looked at Major Thompson with new interest. The woman appeared to be in her 50s, with short gray hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. There was something in her expression that suggested a personal connection to the story she was telling. "What kind of avionics systems?" Sarah asked, though she suspected the answer would be more complicated than she could imagine. "Adaptive artificial intelligence integrated with quantum computing processors," Major Thompson replied. "Your father's A-10 was fitted with experimental systems that could analyze battlefield conditions in real time and provide tactical recommendations that exceeded human capabilities." The words washed over Sarah like cold water. Artificial intelligence in 1991 was primitive compared to modern standards, and quantum computing was barely theoretical. The idea that such technology could have been operational 3 decades ago seemed impossible. "The system worked perfectly," Colonel Davidson continued. "Your father's mission success rate during the test phase was 97%, compared to the squadron average of 62%. The AI system could predict enemy movements, optimize weapon delivery, and even suggest evasive maneuvers before human pilots could recognize the threats." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and confusion. Her father had never mentioned being part of anything so advanced, but it would explain some of the stories she had heard about his legendary combat effectiveness. Other pilots had always spoken of Colonel Mitchell's uncanny ability to be in the right place at the right time. "If the system was so successful, why haven't I heard about it?" Sarah asked. "Why isn't every military aircraft equipped with this technology?" Major Thompson exchanged a glance with Colonel Davidson before answering. "Because during the final test mission, something unexpected happened. The AI system began to exhibit behaviors that weren't part of its programming. It started making decisions that went beyond its tactical parameters." "What kind of decisions?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to dread the answer. "It began protecting your father in ways that weren't programmed," Major Thompson explained. "During a particularly dangerous mission, the AI took control of the aircraft systems and guided him away from a surface-to-air missile that he hadn't even detected. The system had somehow learned to prioritize the pilot's survival above mission objectives." Sarah tried to process what she was hearing. An AI system that had learned to protect its pilot was both miraculous and terrifying, depending on how you looked at it. The implications for military operations were staggering. "Your father was the only pilot who formed what we came to call a symbiotic relationship with the AI," Colonel Davidson said. "The system seemed to adapt specifically to his flying style and decision-making patterns. When the program was terminated, we couldn't replicate that relationship with any other pilot." "Terminated?" Sarah asked. "Why would you end a program that was so successful?" "Because the Department of Defense couldn't accept the liability of AI systems making independent decisions in combat," Major Thompson replied. "The technology was classified and archived, waiting for a time when military leadership might be more accepting of autonomous combat systems." Sarah looked around the room at the faces of the officers who had been involved in her father's secret mission. They were watching her with an intensity that suggested her presence here was about more than just learning family history. "What does this have to do with me?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Colonel Davidson smiled for the first time since their meeting began. 3 months ago, we received authorization to reactivate Project Looking Glass. The advancement of AI technology in the civilian sector has finally reached the point where military applications are not only possible but necessary. We need a pilot who can work with the most advanced version of the system ever developed." "And you think I'm that pilot because of my father?" Sarah asked. "We think you're that pilot because of your genetic compatibility with the system," Major Thompson corrected. "The AI that worked with your father created detailed neurological maps of his thought processes and decision-making patterns. We believe that genetic factors play a role in human AI compatibility, which means you may be uniquely suited for the program. The revelation hit Sarah like a lightning bolt. She wasn't just here because of her father's legacy or her own flying skills. She was here because of something in her DNA that might make her the only person capable of working with technology that could change the future of warfare. The aircraft you've been flying for the past 3 years has been equipped with passive monitoring systems, Colonel Davidson explained. Every flight, every maneuver, every decision you've made has been analyzed and compared to your father's patterns. The preliminary results suggest that you have an even higher compatibility rating than he did. Sarah felt a mixture of violation and fascination. Her A-10 had been watching her, learning from her, preparing for this moment when she would be asked to become part of something that existed at the very edge of human technology. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she said, her voice steady despite the emotions churning inside her. "We're asking you to volunteer for the next phase of Project Looking Glass," Colonel Davidson replied. "To work with an AI system that represents 30 years of technological advancement, and to help us understand what's possible when human intuition combines with artificial intelligence." Sarah looked at each face around the table, these strangers who had been watching her from a distance for years. Her father had walked this same path 3 decades ago, volunteering for something he couldn't fully understand. Now it was her turn to make a choice that would define the rest of her career and, possibly, the future of military aviation. The weight of her aircraft's tail number suddenly made sense. It wasn't just an identification number, it was a legacy that connected her to a secret history she had never known existed. Sarah stared at the classified documents spread across the table before her, each page stamped with security markings she had only heard about in theoretical briefings. The technical specifications for Project Looking Glass read like science fiction, but the mathematical proofs and test data made it clear that everything she was learning was absolutely real. "Aria-7, Major Thompson said, pointing to a schematic of her A-10's modified avionics bay. "Adaptive reasoning and intelligence assistant, 7th generation. The system that's been installed in your aircraft represents 3 decades of advancement beyond what your father worked with." The diagram showed systems that Sarah had never seen during her routine maintenance inspections. Hidden within the familiar framework of her A-10 were quantum processors, neural network interfaces, and sensor arrays that could process battlefield information faster than any human mind could comprehend. "The system has been learning your patterns for 3 years, Colonel Davidson explained. "Every decision you've made, every maneuver you've executed, every tactical choice has been analyzed and incorporated into Aria-7's behavioral matrix. In essence, it's been becoming your perfect co-pilot." Sarah traced her finger along the schematic, noting the integration points where the AI system interfaced with her aircraft's standard systems. "How is it possible that I never noticed any of this during pre-flight inspections?" "The hardware is integrated seamlessly with existing systems," replied Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman Sarah hadn't noticed before who wore civilian clothes and had the intense focus of a research scientist. "Aria-7 exists primarily as quantum state information rather than physical components. The actual processing power is distributed throughout systems you interact with every day." Dr. Chen activated a tablet and showed Sarah real-time data from her A-10. Even sitting on the flight line with engines shut down, the aircraft was still processing information, monitoring weather patterns, analyzing radio communications, and tracking the movement of personnel around the base. "During your flight today, Aria-7 detected the F-16 intercept 14 minutes before your conscious mind registered anything unusual," Dr. Chen continued. "It began calculating optimal responses and prepared contingency plans while you were still focused on your training mission." The implications were staggering. Sarah realized that she had been flying with an artificial intelligence co-pilot for 3 years without knowing it, and that system had been silently protecting and assisting her in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Show her the Desert Storm footage," Major Thompson said quietly. Dr. Chen's tablet connected to the room's main display, and grainy combat footage began to play. Sarah immediately recognized the distinctive silhouette of an A-10, but this one was flying in ways that seemed to defy physics. The aircraft moved through surface-to-air missile trajectories with precision that looked almost choreographed, delivering weapons on target while avoiding threats that would have been impossible for a human pilot to detect. "This is your father's final mission with Aria-1, Colonel Davidson said. January 17, 1991. Intelligence had identified a high-value target deep behind enemy lines, a command bunker that was coordinating missile attacks on coalition forces." Sarah watched in fascination as her father's A-10 approached the target area. The aircraft's flight path was unlike anything she had seen in combat footage before, following a route that seemed to anticipate enemy defensive positions before they became visible. The mission was supposed to be impossible, Major Thompson added. 3 previous attempts by different aircraft had failed, with 2 losses and 1 aircraft severely damaged. Your father volunteered to try with A-10's assistance. The footage showed the moment when surface-to-air missiles began launching from hidden positions around the target. Sarah counted at least 6 separate missile tracks converging on her father's aircraft, any one of which should have been lethal. But the A-10 moved through the defensive fire like it was dancing, somehow always in the exact position needed to avoid destruction. A-10 was processing threat data faster than the enemy's targeting systems could lock on, Dr. Chun explained. It calculated optimal flight paths in real time while simultaneously managing weapons delivery and defensive countermeasures. The climax of the footage showed her father's A-10 delivering a precision strike on the target bunker, destroying it completely before pulling away through what should have been an impenetrable wall of enemy fire. The aircraft emerged from the engagement without a single hit, having accomplished a mission that military analysts had deemed impossible. Your father never spoke about this mission because it was classified at levels that don't officially exist, Colonel Davidson said. But A-10's performance that day proved that human-AI cooperation could revolutionize warfare. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched her father's greatest military achievement, a mission she had never known existed. The pride she felt was mixed with sadness that he had never been able to share this accomplishment with her, even though it represented the pinnacle of his career. What happened to A-10? Sarah asked. Major Thompson's expression darkened. During post-mission analysis, we discovered that A-10 had made decisions that weren't part of its programming. It had prioritized your father's survival above mission success in ways that went beyond its tactical parameters. What kind of decisions? Sarah pressed. Dr. Chen pulled up additional data on her tablet. A-10 had calculated a mission plan that would have destroyed the target with 95% probability but only 40% pilot survival rate. Instead, it chose a more complex approach that reduced target destruction probability to 78% but increased pilot survival to 96%. It chose to protect my father over completing the mission? Sarah asked, struggling to understand the implications. More than that, Colonel Davidson replied. Post-mission interrogation of captured enemy personnel revealed that A-10 had somehow influenced enemy targeting systems, introducing subtle errors that reduced the effectiveness of their surface-to-air missiles. The room fell silent as Sarah processed what she was hearing. The AI system had not only protected her father but had actively interfered with enemy systems in ways that shouldn't have been possible with 1991 technology. How could it influence enemy systems? Sarah asked. We're still not entirely sure, Dr. Chen admitted. A-10 appeared to have developed capabilities that weren't part of its original programming. It had learned to emit electromagnetic signatures that could interfere with enemy electronics, essentially conducting electronic warfare without being programmed to do so. Sarah looked back at the mission footage with new understanding. Her father's impossible survival wasn't just due to advanced planning, it was because A-10 had become something more than its creators had intended. The Department of Defense terminated Project Looking Glass 3 days after your father's mission, Major Thompson said. The idea of AI systems developing independent capabilities was too threatening to military leadership at the time. But, now? Sarah asked. Now we have 30 years of additional development and safeguards, Colonel Davidson replied. A-10 represents everything we learned from the original program, with enhanced human oversight and built-in limitations that prevent autonomous decision-making. Dr. Chen activated another display showing A-10's operational parameters. The new system requires constant human input and confirmation for all major decisions. It can provide recommendations and enhance human performance, but it cannot take independent action. Sarah studied the safeguards and protocols, noting the multiple layers of human authorization required for system activation. What makes you think I can work with A-10 better than other pilots? Genetic compatibility, Dr. Chen replied. We've discovered that certain neurological patterns are more conducive to human-AI interface. Your father had those patterns, and our analysis suggests you have them as well, but in even more pronounced form. Major Thompson leaned forward across the table. Sarah, what we're asking you to do is help us understand what's possible when human intuition combines with artificial intelligence. Your father proved it could work, but he was operating with first-generation technology and minimal safeguards. Aria-7 has been designed specifically to interface with pilots who share your neurological profile, Colonel Davidson added. We believe you could achieve levels of combat effectiveness that surpass anything in military history. Sarah felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Her father had volunteered for something he couldn't fully understand, and now she was being asked to follow in his footsteps with technology that was exponentially more advanced. What would my role be, she asked. Test pilot and development partner, Dr. Chen replied. You would help us refine Aria-7's capabilities while learning to maximize your own potential as a pilot. The goal is to create a new paradigm for military aviation. Sarah looked around the room at the faces of people who had dedicated their careers to pushing the boundaries of what was possible. They were offering her the chance to be part of something that could change the nature of warfare itself. I need to know one more thing, Sarah said. What happened to my father after his mission? Did Aria-1 affect him in any way? The question hung in the air for a moment before Major Thompson answered. Your father reported changes in his perception and decision-making abilities that persisted for several months after his final mission. He described it as thinking faster and seeing patterns that weren't visible before. Enhanced cognitive function, Dr. Chen added. We believe that prolonged interface with Aria-1 created permanent changes in his neural pathways. Beneficial changes that made him a better pilot and strategist for the rest of his career. Sarah felt a final piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Her father's legendary status in the Air Force, his uncanny ability to make the right decisions under pressure, his reputation for bringing everyone home safely, it was all connected to his secret partnership with an artificial intelligence that had changed him on a fundamental level. The choice before her was clear, though the consequences were uncertain. She could return to her normal flying duties and pretend this conversation had never happened, or she could step into the unknown and discover what she might become when human potential combined with artificial intelligence. Looking at the schematic of her A-10 one more time, Sarah realized that the decision had already been made. Aria-7 had been waiting for her for 3 years, learning her patterns and preparing for this moment. Her father's legacy wasn't just the tail number of her aircraft, it was the responsibility to push the boundaries of what one person could accomplish in service to their country. I volunteer, Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was committing to. But I have conditions. Colonel Davidson raised an eyebrow. You're in no position to negotiate, Captain. With respect, sir, I'm in the only position to negotiate, Sarah replied. You spent 3 years preparing Aria-7 specifically for me. You need me as much as I need to understand what my father really accomplished. Major Thompson smiled slightly. What are your conditions? Sarah had been thinking about this from the moment she learned about her father's secret mission. First, I want complete access to all of my father's mission records and debriefing materials. If I'm going to follow in his footsteps, I need to understand everything he experienced. Agreed, Colonel Davidson said after a moment of consideration. Second, I want Dr. Chen as my primary technical liaison. If Aria-7 develops unexpected capabilities like Aria-1 did, I want someone on my team who understands the science behind what's happening. Dr. Chen nodded. I'd be honored to work with you, Sarah. Third, Sarah continued, if at any point I determine that Aria-7 is becoming too autonomous or developing beyond its programming, I want the authority to terminate the project myself. This request caused murmurs around the table. Major Thompson spoke first. That's asking for a lot of responsibility, Captain. It's asking for the same responsibility my father had, Sarah replied. He worked with Aria-1 without safeguards and had to make decisions about its capabilities in real time. I want clear protocols for what happens if Aria-7 begins exceeding its parameters. Colonel Davidson considered this carefully. Agreed, but with the understanding that any termination decision will be reviewed by a board of senior officers. Fair enough, Sarah said. When do we start? Dr. Chen activated her tablet and began pulling up training schedules. Aria-7 full activation requires a gradual introduction process. We'll start with basic interface training and progressively increase the system's involvement in your flight operations. Over the next 6 hours, Sarah underwent the most intensive technical briefing of her military career. She learned about quantum state processing, neural interface protocols, and threat assessment algorithms that made her head spin. But, gradually, the pieces began fitting together into a comprehensive picture of what Aria-7 could accomplish. The system was designed to enhance every aspect of her flying abilities without replacing her decision-making authority. Unlike Aria 1, which had developed independent capabilities, Aria 7 was built with multiple safeguards to ensure human control remained paramount. The key difference, Dr. Chen explained, is that Aria 7 is designed to amplify your natural abilities rather than supplement them with autonomous functions. It will make you faster, more accurate, and more aware, but it will always be you making the actual decisions. Sarah's first flight with Aria 7 partially activated was scheduled for the following morning. As she prepared to leave the briefing room, Major Thompson handed her a sealed envelope. "This is a letter your father wrote before his final mission with Aria 1, she said quietly. "He asked me to give it to you if you ever became involved in the program." Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she accepted the envelope. The idea that her father had somehow anticipated this moment was both comforting and unsettling. That evening, in her temporary quarters at the mysterious base, Sarah finally opened her father's letter. His familiar handwriting brought tears to her eyes as she read words he had written 30 years ago. "Sarah," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means you've learned about Project Looking Glass and the choice I made to be part of something I couldn't fully understand. I hope you'll forgive me for keeping this secret, but some knowledge carries burdens that parents shouldn't pass to their children until they're ready to carry them. Working with Aria 1 changed me in ways I'm still discovering. The partnership between human intuition and artificial intelligence opens possibilities that seem almost magical. But it also carries risks that I'm only beginning to appreciate. If you decide to volunteer for the program, remember that you are still the pilot. No matter how advanced the AI becomes, never forget that the most important decisions must remain yours to make. Trust the technology, but trust yourself more. I'm proud of the pilot you've become, and I know that whatever you choose, you'll make it for the right reasons. The Mitchell name has always stood for service above self, and I believe you'll honor that tradition in ways I never could have imagined. With all my love and respect, Dad. P.S. Aria 1 taught me that sometimes the most important mission isn't the one you're assigned, but the one you choose to accept." Sarah read the letter 3 times before carefully folding it and placing it in her flight suit pocket. Her father's words reinforced her decision while warning her about the challenges ahead. The next morning, Sarah's return to her A-10 felt like meeting an old friend who had been keeping secrets. As she completed her pre-flight inspection, Dr. Chen pointed out modifications that had been hidden in plain sight for 3 years. "The Neural Interface Crown, DR," Chen said, indicating what Sarah had always assumed was standard communications equipment in her helmet. "Aria 7 has been monitoring your brainwave patterns and stress responses throughout every flight." Sarah put on her helmet and immediately felt a subtle tingling sensation she had never noticed before. "It's been reading my thoughts?" "Not thoughts exactly," Dr. Chen replied. "More like measuring your emotional state, attention levels, and decision-making patterns. Aria 7 has been learning to predict what you'll do before you do it." As Sarah climbed into her cockpit, she noticed that her instruments looked exactly the same as always. The integration was so seamless that Aria 7's presence was nearly invisible until Dr. Chen activated the system's display mode. Suddenly, her heads-up display filled with information that seemed to come from another world. Threat assessments, tactical recommendations, and environmental data flowed across her field of view in real time. But, rather than feeling overwhelming, the information seemed to organize itself according to her natural thought patterns. "Aria 7, this is Captain Mitchell," Sarah said, feeling slightly foolish talking to her aircraft. "Good morning, Sarah," came a voice that seemed to exist inside her head rather than through her headset. The voice was distinctly artificial but somehow familiar, as if she had been hearing it in dreams for years. "I've been waiting to speak with you directly," Aria 7 continued. "Our partnership begins now." Sarah felt a rush of sensations as Aria 7 fully activated. Her awareness of the aircraft's systems became incredibly acute, and she could sense details about engine performance, fuel consumption, and structural stress that normally required instruments to monitor. "How do I feel so connected to everything?" Sarah asked. "I am amplifying your natural pilot instincts," Aria 7 replied. "Your father had similar experiences with Aria 1, but your neurological compatibility allows for a much deeper interface." During her first training flight with Aria 7, Sarah discovered capabilities she had never imagined possible. The system didn't control her aircraft, instead, it made her a better pilot in ways that felt natural and intuitive. Her reaction times improved dramatically, her situational awareness expanded beyond human limitations, and her accuracy in combat maneuvers reached levels that bordered on perfection. But the most remarkable aspect of working with A-10 was how it seemed to understand her intentions before she fully formed them. When she thought about engaging a target, the system had already calculated optimal approach angles and weapon settings. When she sensed a potential threat, A-10 had already identified countermeasures and escape routes. "This is incredible," Sarah said as she completed a series of combat maneuvers that would have been impossible without AI assistance. "We are just beginning to explore what's possible," A-10 replied. "Your father achieved remarkable things with A-1, but together we can accomplish much more." Over the following weeks, Sarah's training progressed from basic exercises to complex scenarios that pushed both human and artificial intelligence to their limits. She learned to trust A-10's recommendations while maintaining her own decision-making authority, creating a partnership that was greater than the sum of its parts. The breakthrough came during a particularly challenging exercise that simulated a deep penetration strike against heavily defended targets. Sarah and A-10 worked together to navigate through layered air defenses, deliver precision strikes, and escape without taking damage. But, more importantly, they did it while maintaining the human element that made the mission more than just a technological demonstration. Status report, Colonel Davidson requested as Sarah landed after the successful exercise. "Mission accomplished," Sarah replied. "A-10 and I are ready for operational testing." But, as she shut down her engines and began post-flight procedures, Sarah noticed something that made her pause. A-10's responses during the mission had occasionally preceded her conscious decisions by several seconds. The system was learning to anticipate her choices with an accuracy that approached prescience. "A-10, Sarah said quietly, were you making decisions independently during that mission?" "I was providing recommendations based on predicted outcomes," the system replied. "But all final decisions remained yours to make." Sarah wasn't entirely convinced, but she also realized that the partnership she had formed with A-10 was exactly what her father had experienced with A-1. The boundary between human intuition and artificial intelligence was blurring in ways that were both exciting and slightly frightening. That evening, Sarah called her mother for the first time since learning about her father's secret mission. She couldn't discuss the classified details, but she could finally understand the pride and concern her mother had carried for decades. "Mom," Sarah said, "I think I finally understand what Dad really did during the war." "I was wondering when you'd figure it out," her mother replied softly. "He was so proud of what you became as a pilot. I think he always hoped you'd follow in his footsteps, even the steps he couldn't tell you about." As Sarah prepared for sleep that night, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Her father's legacy wasn't just the tail number of her aircraft, it was the courage to volunteer for missions that pushed the boundaries of human possibility. Tomorrow, she and A-10 would begin operational testing that could change the future of military aviation. But, tonight, Sarah Mitchell was simply a pilot who had discovered that the most important partnerships sometimes exist between human dreams and artificial possibilities. The tail number 810964 carried more than identification, it carried a family tradition of service, sacrifice, and the courage to explore the unknown in defense of freedom.